sometimes opportunity just comes your way, whether it's good or bad or indifferent. Sometimes you just need to take a road trip. And this week is no exception for me. I have to go up to Gainesville. Don't ask. That's just how it goes sometimes. And so I'll be heading up on Friday, and I'm going to take my longest road trip yet. Gainesville's about 300 miles, give or take, from where I live. So I know that I'm going to have to stop a couple of times to get a charge. Probably 2 times on the way up, and then I'm going to turn around and come back. So I'm going to have to get a charge while I'm up there. So it'll have to be a total of 5 charges for the whole trip. So it's going to be an interesting trip that way. It's all fine. I'm cool with it. But it's just one of those things when you stop and think about it, you go, yeah, this is interesting that the opportunity now exists to take my longest road trip yet. I'm going to go for about 600 miles, give or take. And it's going to take a little effort to make it happen. So I've got to make sure the car is completely charged and that I'm ready to go. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem for me. And, I need to just make sure I'm doing a little bit of pre-planning. And I may want to make a stop along the way. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to make a stop, but I may, just to stretch it out a little more and make it a little more compelling and interesting, give me something to do for a few minutes. So we'll see if I wind up doing that. But a couple of possible options are maybe stopping at Disney just to kind of maybe hit Disney Springs for a couple of minutes, even if I don't actually go in anywhere. Or maybe over up by near where the Space Center is. There might be a launch on Friday. If there is, I might go that way. So if that's the case, then we'll give it a shot. But either way, I might need to replan just a little bit as a result of that. And that's the challenge with planning to drive the Tesla like this. You have to do a little bit of planning. I don't have much planning in mind, but I know I might have to do a little planning to try and get me to where I need to be. So let's go through kind of how I set this up, and then we'll go on the road trip. Okay, so here's the thing. The Tesla doesn't allow you to do round trips, and it also doesn't let you do multiple points along a route. So I'm going to use a better route planning app to do a little planning in advance so I have an idea of what it's going to take to do the whole trip. So first I'm going to put in just going from the high school near me all the way up to Gainesville, just so I have a sense of what it's going to take. And it'll take 2 stops, one at Fort Drum, one at Turkey Lake, which is kind of what I'd expect. And now I'll add in the return trip. So that way I know about how much energy I'll need in order to do the trip. What I don't want to do is take the trip up there and then just have enough to get there and then have to charge more on that end and not have planned it well enough. So I spend longer sitting in one destination rather than a place I might want to sit. So I'll go ahead and just do the round trip so I have a sense of what it's going to look like. Now, if I do that, I see that I go up and back, and I'm going to start with the same 2 places, but I get a better sense of what it's going to take when I'm there. There's a Tesla charger in Gainesville, and I can put some energy on it there and get a sense of what it's going to take to come back. It just makes it easier to plan a round trip this way, so that's why I really want to do this. Now, it also estimates what the cost would be if you're going to be doing this. So I have a sense of it's going to be a little over $30 to do the round trip, maybe a little bit more than that, but it just gives me a sense of what it's going to cost. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to add in the other possible destinations. If I'm going to wind up going to see a launch on the morning I go up, then I'm going to add in, let's say, Titusville. Now, I may not go to Titusville. I might actually go somewhere else, but at least it tells me what I might need to do in order to make that trip, because I'm going to have to leave and go out to the coast and come back in. Now, there are lots of superchargers along the way, so it's certainly possible to do this, but I just wanted to have a sense of what it's going to take to do it. So that gives me a pretty good idea of what it's going to take if I do that. So I'm going to have to drive out, go along the coast a little bit, and then I'll drive back in to go to Gainesville. Gainesville's inland a bit, and there's a couple of roads that'll make it easy to go in that way. Now, let's see, if I don't go see the launch and I decide to go over to Disney Springs, let's say, what would it take to do that? How much energy would I need? What other things would I do in that case? So I'll roll that through here too, just to see how it's different. And now I can see that I might have to make a different stop, something that's closer to where the Disney parks are, in order to get up to where I want to go. So that's okay. I just needed to have that idea in my head so I could plan a little bit in my head as far as I'm going. I just want to make it a little bit easier and more convenient so that I don't wind up going out of my way, charging too much one place, not charging enough in another place, or doubling back in some way. Because that's always the fear, is that somehow you wind up doubling back, and I don't want to do that. So now I have a good sense of what it's going to take to do that. Now I can also use this app to zoom in and actually see some of these charging stations, see specifically where they are. It gives me an idea of what I need to do to charge there, and I can kind of take a look at the whole process and understand what it's going to take to do the trip. So I can do a little detailed planning here if I want to. Now I'm just kind of taking a look at it to see why I might stop there versus somewhere else, because there's another supercharger that's just a little bit further up the road. Why wouldn't I make it up that way? Why would I take this route as opposed to a different route on some other road? to get to where I want to go. So it just gives me a sense of how I might go. And, kind of in my thought process as I plan up what I'm going to do, because I want to be a little bit fluid about this, I want to at least have an idea of where I'm going to be going and sort of what I'm going to be doing. So just by taking a look at it, I have a better sense of it. So that'll give me some context on what I'm going to do. Now, the next thing to do is go ahead and set the car up to start charging. I want to make sure that I've turned it on so that it'll charge to 100% for a trip. So I'll change that, and then I'll also change it so that I can depart at a certain time. I'm going to say 6 a.m. It's supposed to be that if there's a launch, it'll be at about 9. 3 hours should be plenty of time to get close to enough to it to where I want to be. So I'll go ahead and make sure that it's ready at 6 o'clock in the morning so I can leave. And that's it, and I'll turn it on and I'll let it go, and I'm ready to go. And then the only other thing is to just plug it in and leave it overnight. And that's it. That's all I have to do to get ready. So I'll just leave it plugged in, I'll go in the house, and I'll go to bed. So this is all set up. It's going to be ready at 6 o'clock. It's currently at about a little over 50%, and we're good to go. Okay, so the next morning I'm ready to go. Charging is scheduled to start, and I'm ready to depart at 6 a.m. It's at 100%. We're good to go. So unfortunately, it turned out that there was no launch. This came out about midnight, and I found out about it early in the morning. So before I even got going, I went ahead and changed my plans and decided to go up through Disney Springs and go up to Gainesville. Now, something I noticed when I put in the route of Gainesville, something was going on with the map here, and it was going a little bit quirky on me, that I couldn't quite figure out how I was going to get there. It was coming up with Fort Drum, then it would switch to Vero Beach, then it would come back, and it was going back and forth. And something was really amiss. I don't know if it was a software glitch or something else happened, but it was really strange. It kept popping back up and changing. And I couldn't figure out what was going on, but I know I've made the trip up to Disney Springs before with that one stop, so I was willing to chance it and go ahead and not have any range anxiety and just see how it worked out. Now, as I switched up and went to Disney Springs directly instead of going all the way to Gainesville, it was doing the same thing. It kept going back and forth between Vero Beach and the Fort Drum Service Plaza. Couldn't figure out what it was doing, but like I said, I figured if I drove it for a while, it may just reset itself and it might be fine. So I was okay with that. And again, I had an idea where I needed to stop and how far I could go, so I figured it would be okay. Now, as I started going, it was doing the same thing. I was out for a while, and I'd been driving for about half an hour, and it kept doing this. And the behavior just kept repeating itself. And I still couldn't figure out why it was doing it. So I decided I was going to pull off for a couple of minutes and see if I could fix it. Maybe by resetting the computer, maybe by trying a couple of different things, trying some different routings, checking all the settings, whatever else I needed to do, because something was really amiss. In fact, it kept doing this quirky behavior where it would come up and say you can't reach your destination. And that was kind of concerning, and it just meant that the computer was doing something wrong. The car was driving fine, looked like the watt hours per mile were fine, but it was doing something quirky when it was driving. Well, obviously something's going on with the computer, because I can always make that trip to Fort Drum with no problem. What it's telling me is that it's going to be under 5%. It likes to keep 5% of the battery in storage just in case there's a little bit of a slowdown or something happens and you can't make it to your destination. So they don't like to have you arrive at a destination with less than 5%. So it kept recalculating me because it kept coming up as 2% for some reason that I can't understand. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and pull off for a couple of minutes and reset the computer and see if that fixes it. I'm not sure that it will. I'm not sure what's going on, but it was kind of a weird moment when it was when it kept recalculating the route to make sure that it would have more than 2%. Very strange. Now, like I said, I made that trip before, so it hasn't been a problem, but let's see what happens now that I reset it. So the computer reset, and also changing the setting that said avoid toll roads that somehow got turned on. I was able to reset the whole system and everything worked fine, and I made it to the Fort Drum Service Plaza for my first charge. All right, so no real problem. When I reset the computer, it actually said stay below 80 miles an hour and I should make it with about 10%. Then it updated again, and updated again, and updated about 10 more times, and finally went back and forth and decided that I could arrive at the Fort Drum Service Plaza with 7%, which is exactly what I arrived with. And that's what I expected. I expected to be in that 7 to 10% range. But something was going on with the computer, and I don't know what it was. It may have to do with new calculations. It also may have to do with the fact that I haven't driven the car in a while. So I haven't been out taking any long road trips, so the battery had to be preconditioned to accept the charges. After I had accepted the route, at one point, it started to precondition the batteries. That may have had something to do with it. I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, I made it to the Fort Drum Service Plaza. I'm here. I'll be here for about 20 minutes or so charging. Now, something I noticed, interesting, potentially, is that behind me, you'll see that there's some new charging stations that have opened up. These were opened by the state of Florida along the turnpike, and they allow for other types of cars to charge up as they pull up. The last time I was here about 8 months or so ago, these were just vacant spots. Now they have a different EV fast charging there that's run by FP&L, and it's from the Evolution company. I don't know what the cost is on it. I'm going to go take a look, but just thought it was interesting that now they're starting to open up the charging market to other companies, which is really, really interesting. Tesla was really the only way to take a long distance trip before, and now you can take these trips with different kinds of cars because they have charging stations here. This is cool. So these are from ChargePoint, and so you need to use the ChargePoint app to get to it. And it's actually pretty easy. They make it easy. You just plug in and charge. As long as you've signed up with ChargePoint, you can do your charging. So they make it really easy, and it does charge up to, I think it said 125 kilowatt hours, I think is what it said. Let's see if it cycles around again and says it. Start charging, blah, blah, blah. Yep, 125 kilowatts shared. So that's actually pretty good. That's equivalent to the Tesla charger over there. And you do have the different types of charging ports. So you have the large charging port for some types of cars. I can't remember which ones use this. And then you have the smaller ones that have the J1772, and then you have the other charge type. So if I were going to plug in the Tesla, I would use the top one there and be able to charge it. It's actually pretty cool. Not bad at all.
I looked it up in the ChargePoint app, and it looks like it's 30 cents a kilowatt hour to charge at this station. Tesla charges 26, so there you go, it's about even.
So you get the 7 ChargePoint stations here, and then the 10 Tesla Superchargers over on this side. So that's actually pretty nice that they're offering this. It gives you a lot of flexibility when you're traveling in an electric vehicle. Okay, my glasses have really fogged up because of the mask and the relatively cool temperature. It's about 55 degrees outside right now. But so you may see my glasses a little fogged and a little covered because the sun is high up in the sky right now. But anyway, realizing that there's electric charging available a lot of different places, the question for me is, will I always be driving an electric car for the rest of my life? And I think the simple answer is yes. I can't see myself going back to a gas car at any point in the future. Now, it's possible it won't always be a Tesla that I'm driving. I may switch to some other company's car at some point. I love my Tesla, don't get me wrong. But I'd be willing to reconsider and try a different type of car at some point if the right type of car was available and was something that I liked and was fuel efficient, and I have the ability to charge other places. Like I said, for now, I'm very happy with the Tesla. I have no intent on changing it. But just looking forward, I realize there's more. There's going to be a lot more things you can do and a lot of different types of cars you can get in the future. So, totally cool.
So it took 34 kilowatt hours to charge it back up to a place where I could go. So it was there about 10 o'clock in the morning, about 2 hours after I left. And I continued on my trip and made a little stopover at the Walt Disney World to go into Disney Springs for a few minutes.
So I charged up to 80% at my last stop, and as I said I would, I stopped here at Disney World just for a couple of minutes just to kind of see what was going on. Nothing much, just wanted to take a break, stretch my legs, so that's exactly what I'm doing for a couple of minutes. Maybe head over to Disney Springs, which is kind of behind me, hang out for a little bit, but that's pretty much it. You know, just something to do for a few minutes to break up the monotony of the drive.
And then it was on to stop number 2, which is up on Sand Lake Road, a little bit northeast of Disney World, and I was able to pull in there and get some charging. So that was my next stop.
Well, welcome to charging stop number 2. On this stop, I'm taking a little break and having a little snack while I'm waiting for the car to charge. Not a big deal. I'm north of Orlando right now, so well on my way. This is great. You know, this is just perfect. It's an easy day, easy trip. Really no problem at all. This charging station happens to be in a Wawa parking lot. I moved a little closer because there was a truck passing by, which I always find kind of funny. But we're good. Just be here for a few minutes and I'll be on my way again. So when I think about this trip, I think about it as being almost an adventure in a way. When I set out to take this trip, I didn't know where I was going to go exactly. I knew where my end destination was and then I was going to come back. But that's it. I didn't know if I was going to stop somewhere or do something else. So I had this plan, maybe stopping to see a space launch if there was one, and found out early this morning that there was not, or was going to just swing by Disney and just take a few minutes and drive around just kind of for the fun of it. It's just sort of the adventure part, right? It's just something to do while you're out. You know, I really didn't have a specific plan in mind other than that. I just wanted to kind of get out, enjoy myself a little bit, take a little road trip and have a little adventure with it and see what happens. I'd never taken the Tesla on a longer trip like this. So in a way, it's kind of cool because it worked out where I wasn't sure where I was going to stop, what I was going to do. When I was going along that one point before I reached the Fort Drum Service Plaza, it really wasn't clear to me what was going to happen there. Was I going to be able to make it all the way there? Was I going to have to go off the highway somewhere and go somewhere else? If I had taken a trip up to the Space Coast, where would I have stopped? How would I have gotten back across the state? Because the Space Coast is on the east, Gainesville's inland a little bit. How would I have done this? And it really doesn't matter. You know, the car was doing such a great job of guiding me and pushing me in the right direction that it really wasn't an issue at all. It was just easy to just kind of go along and, you know, take the trip. And now here I am just north of Orlando, and I'm kind of thinking about how the rest of the trip is going to go. I have about an hour and a half to 2 hours left to drive. Not a big deal, you know, just stop every couple of hours and kind of relax and enjoy myself. I stopped the first time and I just kind of hung out for a little bit, used the restroom, and just waited for a little bit. This time I'm having a little lunch, and then I'm going to go on to my trip, and then I'll do whatever I need to do on the way home too. But it's kind of interesting because it is much more like an adventure. I'm seeing people sitting in their cars and relaxing similarly, same kinds of things as I look at other Tesla owners. Chatted with a few of them for a moment or two, but you know, social distancing being what it is, everybody wants to keep their distance. I get it. But it's interesting because, you know, people are just hanging around. They're using their phones. They're watching the TVs on the car. They're eating lunch. They're doing whatever. Same thing I'm doing. Just enjoying the adventure of it all. And that's the thing about owning an electric car. It is slightly more of an adventure than driving a traditional car, but in a way it's much more fun because there's more happening, and you really have to stop and smell the roses. It kind of goes along with the idea of sort of the pandemic in a way, right? You in the pandemic, you had to stop, stay home, and you had time to admire the simple beauties in life, right? Watch the trees grow outside, watch the flowers, watch it bloom, watch the squirrels run through the yard, see how the birds migrate into your yard, watch the way the sun changes its direction, and enjoy the simple beauties in life a little bit. And in a way, this trip is sort of the metaphor for that. It extends it in a way because I'm just kind of enjoying it. There's no specific time we need to be anywhere. There's nowhere other than getting to Gainesville. There's nothing I have to really do. So I can just take my time and enjoy it. I've talked on the phone with people. I've listened to music. I've listened to podcasts. It's kind of awesome. It's a way to get things done. I know by the end I'm going to be tired. I have no doubt about that. But there's an adventure that goes along with it that's so captivating. It makes it all worthwhile.
So at around 12:50 or so, I pulled out, and I was charged about $8.84 for my charging, which was about 34 kilowatt hours.
So this is the halfway point of my trip. I'm actually stopped and doing the thing I need to do up here, and then after that I'll be heading back home. So it's been, you know, halfway. We're ready to go back and head home, and we'll have a couple of stops on the way home. Still have a couple more things I need to do, but we're going on the way. Been a really fun trip, I have to say.
And now it was time for stop number 3 before I started to head home.
Stop number 3, and we're here at a Whole Foods market, so I'm gonna go in and get some food. That's what I'm gonna do while I'm here at Whole Foods.
Unfortunately, I didn't get any shots of me plugging in my car, but the guy next to me happened to pull up just as I was recording, and here's what it looks like. It's that easy. Now, we sat in the car and played chess while we were waiting, and we were ready to go after that. Again, it was about 34 kilowatt hours, and we were there at about 3:30 in the afternoon as we headed home. Now, as we continued on along the way, we wound up going through the Turkey Lake Plaza on stop number 4.
We've made it to stop number 4. This is the 4th charging stop I've got along the way, so we'll charge up here for about 15 minutes. All the charging stops have been about 15 minutes or so. Each one of them has been about the same. The last one we did in the Whole Foods parking lot, we wound up staying a little bit longer and charging a little bit more, so we were just playing the games and whatever, but we wound up staying a little bit longer. But overall, it said no more than about 20 minutes, I think, or maybe it was 25. But anyway, it was fine. Otherwise, it's all been fairly short charges. just continuing on. I've been on the road since about 8 this morning. It's right around 5 o'clock now. Still got a couple hours to get home, but we're getting there, and that's what's really fun. Like I said, taking the time to smell the roses and get this done has been just great. Right now I'm going to eat a little food I picked up at Whole Foods. I figured I'd wait, needed a stop here, so that's what I'm going to do right now, and it's all good.
So I got a chance to eat the sushi that I had picked up at Whole Foods, and we were on our way. So this one was about 24 kilowatt hours that we picked up there, and we continued on, and we were there about 5:45 in the afternoon. And then it was on to our last stop. The last charging stop was the place I started, down in Fort Drum. So I was able to pull in there, and we got our last charge of the day.
And so here we are at the last charge of the trip. We're about an hour and a half away from the last charge, and here we are. It's going to be the last one. This one was one of the longer charges. It took about 25 minutes again, but again, not a big deal. I actually took a little nap in the back seat for a few minutes while I was waiting. It's been a long day, a lot of driving. Not a big deal. It was fine. Taking these breaks has been terrific, but yeah, now it's time to head home. And this is the last part of it. We got about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours to get home, and that's it. And the trip's over. So this is pretty good. I'm back at the first charging station I came to, with the charge point stations behind me that we looked at this morning. So here we are. And I think I'm about done. I'm going to unplug, and we will get out of here.
Now we came through at about 7:30 in the evening and put about 30 kilowatt hours into the car. Now you may notice that along the way on the turnpike, there was no charge for any of the charges that we made. Hey, Merry Christmas to us that it was free charging. So we got to 77% and started on our way. Now there was an interesting thing that happened. It showed 80% while we were driving, but then it told me to keep my speed below 65 miles an hour to make my destination, and I would be at 5% when I got there. As I drove further along, it changed, and it took away that warning and said that I would reach it with 11%, which is what ultimately happened. Really strange. So it was some other random quirky behavior that was happening in the software that I can't explain, but it seemed to work out okay, and it corrected itself as we were driving. It just was really weird that it got to that point.
All right, so it was about, let's see, I left about 8 this morning. It's just after 10 now. So it was about 14 hours. About 325 miles each way, 325 miles each way, so that's about 650 miles I drove to take this trip. We did the 5 stops for charging. We did hit some traffic along the way. There was a couple of spots where there was a lot of traffic, so clearly it took longer than it probably should have, but good trip overall. Really not so bad. Taking the breaks along the way really does make a difference in terms of taking a longer trip. When I've taken this same trip in a gas car I've driven, it felt longer somehow. I don't know, maybe because I didn't take as many breaks, because I wasn't forced to. But overall, I thought it was successful, very pleasant to drive. Longest trip I've taken thus far, and maybe the longest one I take. I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but it was pretty easy, pretty straightforward. We'll go over the math on how much I spent on fuel versus what the cost would have been if I did if I had used gas. So just so you have a sense of what it costs to run this car. But overall, I thought it was pretty successful. I'm pretty happy, and it was good.
So I put together a little chart of what my stops were, how many kilowatt hours I put in, what my cost was that they actually charged me, and what the total cost should have been had they been charging me. Like I said, Merry Christmas to me, but had they charged me, it would have been that. So the total cost to me was $17.68 to take this trip. My expected total cost would have been $40.56. Now, if I were to include in the one charge I had at home, that would have been another $3.30. Now, comparing that with gasoline, if I think about a 15-gallon tank at $2.25 a gallon, that would be about $33.75 for my total to fill my tank, and I'd need to fill it on both ends, so essentially it would be double that. And so my net cost difference would be about $20 to my advantage, give or take, to driving the electric car versus putting gas in the car. Now, as you may recall, I've always said that my watt hours per mile is somewhere around 240 to 250. But for now, my watt hours per mile after this 650 mile trip has gone down to about 237 for the entirety of the life of the car. And that's because on this trip, because I was driving at highway speeds most of the time. The watt hours per mile was way down to about 210 watt hours per mile, which is just absolutely astounding.